Thanks, Emily. All right, let's move on to our next one. So we're seeing this one a lot too. You're going to force women to die from tubal pregnancies, and claims that doctors will not be allowed to do life-saving medical procedures for people. So we've got multiple thoughts on this. Let me start by just taking a minute to talk about the confusing language between pro-life and pro-choice people on this topic. We actually did an entire podcast episode with Dank Pro Life Memes, who I see in the chat. We did an episode with him about this a few years ago, but I'll just kind of just like summarize. This is one of those cases where pro life and pro choice people tend to use different language, and it's important to minimally be aware of that. If not, maybe be open to changing your language in order to kind of be less confusing or match the way that they're thinking. It's going to be kind of up to you how you want to define things. But typically, pro-life people, especially the ones that want to be able to say like they are opposed to all abortions, no exceptions, are going to define abortion as an elective procedure to end a pregnancy, kill a baby, however you want to end that sentence. And then you're going to have a lot of times pro-choice people will say that abortion is broader than that, that technically miscarriages are abortions. They're called spontaneous abortions. Now, almost no one uses that phrase, but technically, like any kind of termination of pregnancy can be medically defined as an abortion. And so here's this confusing thing that can happen. So, like, for example, and we talked about this in that podcast, like there was this statement out of Dublin after Savita Halpin-Avar died of a bunch of pro-life doctors and OBGYNs basically saying that there never, ever need to be abortions to save a woman's life. But the way that they were defining abortion was as an elective procedure. So do you see the confusing language thing here? This functionally a circular statement. It's not a very meaningful statement because the statement basically says you will never need to do an elective procedure for inelective reasons. It's like, yeah, like, and the sky is blue. Like, it's just not a very meaningful statement because of the way they defined abortion. They defined the life-saving procedures out of it that some people might refer to as abortions. And so, my general approach with this, and I know not all pro-lifers agree with it, and that's okay. I think like half the pro-lifers that disagree with me or disagree with me about some form of like the language debate would be to say like, I don't care so much what you label a thing. What I care about is whether or not it is morally justified or not. So the pro-choice person I'm talking to wants to label any kind of procedure, whether or not to save a woman's life or an elective abortion, as an abortion. Okay, fine. I can work with that and say, okay, well then there is one case where then under that definition, I think that abortion would be justified, which would be if her life is, severely at risk. And then I'm going to be opposed to all the other abortions because I think it's really philosophically different. It's really morally different if you're having an abortion for all of the other reasons. And so there's just a lot of confusion about the debate here. Most pro-life people are using language, are using the definition of abortion that they're using in the Dublin statement. So just kind of know, typically when pro-life groups talk about this, they're going to be using abortion only as a term to refer to as elective abortions. And a lot of times pro-choice people aren't doing that. In the end, tubal pregnancies are the most common life-threatening kind of situation for women, especially in the first trimester. And it is very uncontroversial in the pro-life movement that something can be done, whatever you want to call it. You want to call it an abortion? Fine. You want to call it a medical procedure to save a woman's life? Fine. Either way, basically just about everyone agrees that it's justified. There are internal nerdy philosophical debates that go like really into the weeds of that, but in the end, even the Catholic Church, the United States Council of Catholic Bishops, is like everyone's kind of on the same page that you can intervene. They might think through that using the lens of double effect reasoning, which you can look up. You can do it via self-defense thinking. Either way, in the end, I like it this way. Steve Wagner said this one time, and I don't know if it was originally him or not, but I've been using it since because it's this really great way to say it. Nobody wants women to have to commit suicide via pregnancy. That is something that we can agree on. The pro-life, that's not what the pro-life position is. when you're talking about tubal pregnancies where we cannot save the baby, where we can't do anything, sadly. Maybe one day we can. That would be awesome, but maybe not also. We don't know. But this is triage. This is a triage situation, and we train doctors, we train, doctors who are, soldiers in war who are gonna go out on the battlefield. We train them how to make, instant life and death decisions about who they're gonna treat in what order, and it doesn't mean that they're dehumanizing the ones who go last. It means that they have certain factors that they're going to do their best. And this is one of those cases where we're going to do our best to save as many as we can. There's almost never a situation where we've actually have to choose between mom and baby. Almost always the mom can live, at least if you do this medical procedure to take care of the pregnancy. So it's usually going to be tubal pregnancies. It's just not controversial in the pro-life movement, and that is something that is really, really important for pro-life people to be finding a way to mention as often as they can, because amazingly, pro-choice people, a lot of them, are confused about this. And like I got asked today by the Washington Post, like, what do you think about life of the mother exceptions? Do you see like a lot of division in the pro-life movement? It's like, no, I don't see that. It's like there's like no division on that. Yeah, and how to work that. There's division on other things for sure, but life of the mother, that is not something, and even they are kind of seeing that unity happen.
So now the obvious question becomes, now that we kind of know what the pro-life position is, what are the laws actually saying? Because there's also a lot of pro-choice panic that the way laws are currently being written, even if the pro-life movement wants women to be able to, not have to die from their pregnancy, that's not really what's happening in the law. And so I've heard a lot of different claims about that, and I want to give us some space to talk about those. I want to give a huge shout out to Daniel Gump. He has done incredible research. You can find his research online about going through the abortion laws in every single state. It's amazing. I'm sure it took him an insane amount of time, and I am very grateful that I did not have to do that because he did all the research for me. It was great. So we're going to throw up one of his graphics on the screen, Tim. And this specifically is a graphic about the abortion law exceptions by state. So where do we have abortion laws where there is an exception specifically to save the life of the mother, which is what it would be in the case of an ectopic pregnancy. That would be a procedure to save the life of the mother. So ectopic pregnancy is already included in here. There are only 4 states that do not specifically mention exceptions for the life of the mother. But I want you to notice what those 4 states are, because I don't really think that's a problem. Like Oregon, for example, by the way, to those of you that were making fun of me because I said Oregon in a TikTok I made like 2 days ago, I'm sorry. Apparently it's Oregon. Everyone in Oregon, I'm apologizing now. I'm a Midwesterner. Clearly, I don't know how to say your state properly. But here we go. So in
People have no
Oregon,
idea how many TikTok comments
we
and YouTube
literally
comments we've gotten about that one video.
that one video blew up on TikTok, not because anyone cared about what I said about abortion, but because I said Oregon like 3 seconds into the video, and then people had to go in the chat and explode their frustration with how I pronounced it, and that made them watch the whole rest of the video. And so TikTok thought that people were fascinated in what I had to say about abortion when really they just wanted to make fun of my Midwestern accent. So I'm sorry. Oregon. In Oregon, there are no restrictions on abortion at all. It is available for all 9 months of pregnancy. And so, of course, you can get treatment for an ectopic pregnancy there. I'm not worried that there needs to be an exception about life of the mother when there are no restrictions on abortion at all. And so, you can get treatment for an ectopic pregnancy in every single state. Now, there's a second graphic that I also want to put up here, also from Daniel Gump, that talks specifically about the states in which there is a reference to ectopic pregnancy specifically. So it really isn't necessary because it's already being covered in the life of the mother. But a lot of states, in order to avoid any possible confusion, will put in a clause specifically about ectopic pregnancy. And I'm grateful for that. As you can see, a lot of states have done that. I think all states should do it to avoid any possible confusion, but it isn't actually necessary because they have that other clause in place in their abortion law. But I do want people to know that there are lots of states that have this specifically mentioned, and yes, encourage your state to have it specifically mentioned, because the more clarity we have, the better for everyone, I think. I do want to talk specifically about two states that I've been hearing a lot about recently. So the first one is Missouri. There is this crazy internet fiasco happening where everyone is freaking out about the Missouri law. They claim that the Missouri law, or the Missouri law that they were trying to pass essentially, was trying to outlaw ectopic pregnancy. And that is not what it says at all. Okay, what the law was trying to do was essentially prevent a woman with an ectopic pregnancy from being given an abortion pill. Because abortion pills don't actually treat ectopic pregnancy. Actually, it really does the opposite. If you give someone an abortion pill when they have an ectopic pregnancy, that abortion pill can mask the symptoms of their ectopic pregnancy. And so they won't know they have an ectopic pregnancy and it can be deadly. This often happens when someone gets one over the counter, say they're getting an over counter abortion pill, they're not under the care of a doctor, so they haven't had an ultrasound that would identify if this was actually an ectopic pregnancy or not. That's one reason they have to do ultrasounds before they perform abortion procedures, is they're trying to make sure that this pregnancy is in the uterus. And so mail order abortion pills, when a woman isn't under the care of the physician, can be dangerous since no one's checked to do that. And so Missouri was trying to eliminate that. That way, no women would take this pill not knowing they had an ectopic pregnancy, and then they would die. There is a super in-depth analysis of this bill by our friends at Secular Pro-Life that I'm going to have Tim throw up on the screen just so you know where you can find it, and I will also throw it in the chat. But basically, this article describes that there are really three main takeaways. What they're saying is that pharmacists can't distribute abortion-inducing drugs by mail or a delivery service, and out-of-state pharmacists cannot be licensed in Missouri if they import abortion-inducing drugs into Missouri. The Missouri law also defines abortion such that treatment of ectopic pregnancies does not count as an abortion, and physicians in Missouri can 100% treat ectopic pregnancies. And third, anyone who gives an illegal abortion-inducing drug to a woman with an ectopic pregnancy, in other words, giving her something when they haven't checked to see if the pregnancy is ectopic and that could kill her, that doctor could be charged with a Class A felony for giving her that drug without checking to see if it was actually ectopic. So I'm throwing that link in the chat right now to that amazing article. If you want to look more into that Missouri law, you can do that. The second state that we want to do a little deep dive into is Tennessee. And this was actually brought to our attention by one of our commenters on, I think it was on Facebook, maybe it was on Twitter. I don't even know. Josh, you found this one. I don't know who it was. So whoever you were, thank you for bringing this one to our attention. But there's been a lot of concern from pro-choice people that this pro-life person brought up to us, saying that the law in Tennessee is written so vaguely that an OBGYN would essentially have to risk being accused of a Class C felony if they were going to perform a life-saving DNC. And so obviously OBGYN does not want to get accused of a Class C felony, and so they're going to be less likely, they're not going to want to perform that life-saving procedure. Andrew, you did some digging into this one. So what did you find?
Yeah, so first of all, one important bit of context. A lot of times this is brought up within the context of miscarriage. So for those who don't know, sometimes when a woman has a miscarriage, the fetus or embryo does not pass on its own from the uterus. And so at that point, you need to have a medical procedure done. And sometimes this is a medical procedure which resembles in many ways a DNC, which would be performed as an abortion, in order to remove the now dead child before very serious health complications would arise for the mother. And so the idea is, in this scenario, because a DNC is classified as an abortion, doctors have to be afraid that they're going to be prosecuted for doing this life-saving treatment that is clearly not an abortion. And so I think we have a passage from the law. Tim, if you can put that up on the screen. This is from the first section of the law. Sorry for the snark here, but a little bit of a reading comprehension test. All right. As used in this section, abortion means the use of any instrument, medicine, drug, or any other substance or device with intent to terminate the pregnancy of a woman known to be pregnant with intent other than, keywords, other than, to increase the probability of a live birth, to preserve the life or health of the child after birth, or to remove a dead fetus. So the law very, very clearly, I mean, as clearly as you could possibly hope, exempts this from the definition of abortion. And so, going back to the fighting over the definition of abortion and what is and is not an abortion, it's difficult because you can't assume that just when a person or a state or a legislator uses the word, they mean the same thing from one place to another. But it's there because laws almost always define things. And in this particular case, it's a very helpful definition. The OB has no reason to fear. If he is in fact performing a life-saving D&C after a miscarriage, it is completely and specifically exempted from the law. And so the second question, which kind of follows, is, well, what about legal safeguards for doctors who are in some sort of an ethical predicament that leaves only very little time to kind of reach a judgment? And so the idea here would be, if a woman comes in and she is in a difficult situation, so maybe hypertension, for example, where it's a very real threat to her life, but we don't know necessarily the percentage chances. In these kinds of situations, doctors have to make a judgment call. And it's one of the scarier, more complicated things in medical ethics is doctors sometimes just have to make decisions because you need to do something right away. And so wouldn't a doctor who performs an abortion that might not have been medically necessary but might have been medically necessary have to worry that he's going to get prosecuted? And then we go to section 2. The physician determined in the physician's good faith medical judgment upon the facts known to the physician at the time that the abortion was necessary to prevent the death of the pregnant woman or to prevent serious risk of substantial and irreversible impairment of a major bodily function of the pregnant woman. No abortion shall be deemed authorized, so on and so forth. It's a specific exemption. Again, it covers the doctor. He has to act on his best judgment. He has to act on information and belief, to kind of use the legal term. And the law has explicitly made provision for this because it understands that doctors have to make decisions. Now, if a doctor keeps doing things and claiming medical necessity at an egregiously high rate, yeah, that might be grounds for investigation. There are only so many cases like this that happen. But for an OB, you don't need to worry in Tennessee. And to the extent that people are manufacturing worry and trying to stir up a debate and create a narrative based on it, it would be taken care of if you just read the law. So, moral of the story, please read laws. Just look it up if you have a question. It's usually written right there, even if it's in legalese.
And we should all be promoting laws to be as clear as that Tennessee one was. Like, that's an example of a really well-written law that was brought to our attention, and people were still freaking out about it because they didn't go read the law. But as all of these states are drafting laws in the coming weeks and months and years, we should be encouraging them to be as clear as possible. Please put in the exception for life of the mother. Please specify ectopic pregnancy too, so everybody's clear. Make sure that you talk about what happens if a doctor is in a panic situation and they just have to use what information they have at the time. Like, we should make these laws as clear as possible, but also you should read them. I'm sorry to be snarky, but please read the laws.